Otis slammed the brakes of his black SUV. Dust swirled around a small, rickety orange stand by the highway. He stepped out, his polished leather shoes crunching on the dry gravel. Then, it happened. A small, thin boy with clouded, sightless eyes lunged forward. He didn't stumble. He grabbed Otis's expensive wool trousers with trembling hands. "Daddy, you came back." "I knew you would," the child cried out. Otis froze. His heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the boy, then at the woman behind the stand. Sasha stood there, her face pale as ash, clutching an old, broken brass compass to her chest. It was the same compass Otis had given her 7 years ago. How did this blind child recognize a man he had never seen? Why was Sasha trembling like a leaf in the wind? Otis's breath hitched as a dark realization began to take root. The silence on the highway was heavy. Otis stared down at the small hands gripping his trousers. The boy's fingers were stained with orange juice and dust. Sasha took a sharp step forward, but her feet seemed heavy, like she was walking through deep mud. She didn't reach for the boy. Instead, she tucked the broken brass compass deeper into her apron pocket. Her knuckles were white. Otis tried to find his voice. He looked at Sasha, searching for the vibrant woman he once knew, but all he saw was a ghost. She looked older, her skin weathered by the sun, her eyes darting toward a beat-up truck parked behind the stand. Otis cleared his throat, his voice raspy. "Sasha, what is this?" He didn't say, "Who is this child?" He couldn't bring himself to ask. Sasha didn't answer. She finally grabbed the boy's shoulders and pulled him back with a force that seemed almost desperate. "He's just confused, Otis. The heat. It does things to his head." She wouldn't look him in the eye. She kept her gaze fixed on the SUV, on the luxury that screamed he didn't belong here. The boy, Xavier, shook his head stubbornly. He reached out again, his small nose twitching. "No, Mom. It's the wood. The sweet wood smell. You told me. You said when the air smells like the old forest." It's him. Otis felt a chill run down his spine despite the Georgia heat. He hadn't used that sandalwood oil in years. He had only put it on 10 minutes ago. A sudden, inexplicable impulse. Before he could speak, a metallic clatter echoed from the back of the orange stand. A man's shadow stretched across the gravel. Sasha's entire body went rigid. She didn't look at Otis anymore. She looked at the shadow with pure, unadulterated dread. She whispered, barely audible, "You need to leave right now. Before he sees you." Otis looked at the child, then at the shadow. Why was Xavier's mother so terrified of a man seeing a billionaire? And why was a blind child carrying the only gift Otis had ever given Sasha? Otis didn't move. He felt like he was standing on a landmine, and the fuse had just been lit. The shadow grew longer, stretching across the dusty crates of oranges until it touched Otis's polished leather shoes. A man stepped out from behind the tarp. He was large, wearing a grease-stained tank top and heavy work boots that looked like they hadn't been cleaned in months. This was Curtis. He didn't look at Sasha or the boy first. His eyes went straight to the black SUV, squinting at the chrome rims reflecting the harsh Georgia sun. Then, he looked at Otis. He saw the tailored suit, the gold watch, and the way Otis stood straight and commanding. Curtis spat on the ground, just inches from Otis's feet. "We don't get many city suits around here," Curtis said, his voice like gravel grinding together. He walked over to the small table and grabbed the plastic jar where Sasha kept the meager earnings from the day. He shook it. A few crumpled bills and coins rattled inside. Curtis frowned and stuffed the money into his own pocket. Sasha didn't move to stop him. She stayed frozen, her hand still clutched tightly over the pocket where the brass compass was hidden. Otis felt a surge of heat that had nothing to do with the weather. He looked at the contrast. He had millions in his bank account, and here was the woman he once loved, standing in the dirt, watching a man steal her grocery money. "Is there a problem here?" Otis asked, his voice low and dangerous. Curtis laughed a dry, mocking sound. He stepped closer. the smell of stale beer and sweat clashing with the expensive sandalwood scent on Otis's skin. "No problem, rich man. Just family business," Curtis sneered. He reached out and roughly patted Xavier's head, making the boy flinch and stumble back. Sasha's eyes filled with a sudden, sharp panic. She looked at Otis, a silent plea for him to stay silent, but her lips were trembling. Otis looked at the way Curtis gripped the boy's shoulder. It wasn't a gesture of affection, it was a gesture of ownership. Curtis leaned in, his eyes narrowing as he looked from Otis to Sasha. "Wait a minute," Curtis whispered, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "You two look like you've seen a ghost, or maybe an old debt." He turned his gaze back to Otis's SUV. "That's a lot of car for a few bags of oranges." He then looked at Xavier, who was still whispering "Daddy" under his breath. Curtis's grin vanished. He grabbed Sasha's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "Sasha, why is the kid talking? And why is this man still standing on my dirt?" Otis reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of $100 bills. He saw Curtis's eyes widen with greed. But as Otis looked at the fear in Sasha's eyes, he realized this wasn't just about poverty. There was a reason Curtis was here, and there was a reason he was being paid to stay. Otis threw a single bill onto the dusty ground. But he didn't do it to help. He did it to see what Sasha would do next. The $100 bill fluttered in the hot breeze before landing in the red Georgia clay. Curtis didn't hesitate. He dropped Sasha's arm and lunged for the dirt, his fingers scrambling like a hungry animal. Sasha didn't look at the money. She didn't look at Curtis. Her eyes were fixed on the small, brass compass now slipping from her trembling fingers. It hit the ground with a soft thud. Xavier, hearing the sound, knelt down instantly. His small hands swept across the dirt until he found the cold metal. He held it up, his blind eyes searching for the sun. "Mom, the needle is moving." "You said the needle only moves when the heart is close." The air suddenly felt thin. Otis watched as Sasha's face drained of what little color was left. She lunged forward, not to help the boy, but to snatch the compass away and hide it. "Give it to me, Xavier. It's broken." "I told you it's broken," she hissed, her voice cracking with a fear that Otis had never heard before. But it was too late. Otis stepped forward, his shadow engulfing both the mother and the child. He reached out and caught Sasha's wrist. His grip was firm, his eyes locked onto the back of the compass. In the center of the scratched brass, there was a small, hand-carved inscription. 2 letters, O and S, underneath a date. The exact day Otis had left for the city 7 years ago. But that wasn't what made Otis's blood run cold. It was the second inscription, freshly scratched into the metal, much newer than the first. It was a name, Xavier Otis Jr. Otis felt the world tilt. He looked at the boy's face, the shape of the jaw, the curve of the ears. They were his. This wasn't just a child calling for a father. This was his son. And he was blind. Before Otis could utter a single word, Curtis stood up, wiping the dust from the $100 bill. He saw the look on Otis's face and the compass in his hand. Curtis's greedy smile turned into a mask of pure malice. He reached behind his back and pulled out a burner phone. "Hey, Gloria." Curtis barked into the receiver, his eyes never leaving Otis. "You better get down here. The billionaire found the problem you paid me to bury." The truth had just crashed into the red clay, and Otis was standing in the middle of a lie 7 years in the making. If you believe Otis deserves to know the full truth about his son, please hit the like button and subscribe to follow this journey to justice. We are so grateful to have you with us today. Tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? New York, South Africa, or London? We want to know. Otis stared at the name on the compass, his thumb tracing the jagged letters of his own name, his son. He had a son. He looked at Xavier, then back at the woman he once promised to love forever. But the warmth of discovery was instantly replaced by a searing, white-hot rage. He let go of Sasha's wrist as if her skin burned him. You told me you moved to the city with that manager. Otis rasped, his voice trembling with a mix of fury and betrayal. My mother showed me the letter. She said you left because I wasn't rich enough yet. Sasha didn't answer with words. She scrambled backward, pulling Xavier into the shadows of the tarp. She was shaking so violently that the crates of oranges rattled behind her. I never wrote a letter, Otis, she whispered, her eyes wide and wet. I never left this town. I couldn't, she shielded Xavier's head, her body a frail barrier against the world. Otis didn't hear her. He was trapped in the memory of a lie that had dictated his entire life. He reached out to touch Xavier, his hand hovering inches from the boy's cheek, but Sasha slapped it away. Don't touch him, she screamed, a primal sound that echoed off the hot asphalt. You don't get to come back here with your expensive car and your gold watch and claim him. You weren't here when he cried for weeks because his world went dark. You weren't here when I had to choose between his medicine and a roof over our heads. Otis recoiled as if he had been punched. The boy went dark. He looked at Xavier's clouded eyes. What happened to him, Sasha? Why can't he see? Sasha's face twisted into a mask of bitter irony. She pointed a shaking finger toward the horizon, toward the massive estate where Otis's mother lived. Ask Gloria. Ask her why she stopped the doctors from seeing us. Ask her why she told the pharmacy that I was a thief so they wouldn't fill his prescriptions. Curtis laughed from the background, still holding the burner phone. The old lady is on her way, Otis. And she doesn't look happy. Otis felt the air grow heavy. He looked from the terrified woman to the blind boy, then at the man who was being paid to keep them in the dirt. He realized he had been living a lie, but the lie went much deeper than a stolen letter. He reached into the SUV and pulled out a heavy leather folder. He threw it onto the orange stand, but his eyes stayed on Sasha. If my mother did this, why is Curtis still here? Why is your own cousin the one holding the leash? Sasha's eyes darted to Curtis, then back to the ground, her silence more chilling than any scream. There was one more secret, one that Sasha was even more afraid of than Gloria. The dust on the highway began to swirl as a silver Mercedes slowed down and pulled up behind Otis's SUV. The local townspeople, who had been watching from a distance, started to inch closer. They whispered behind their hands, pointing at Otis's expensive suit and then at Sasha's tattered shoes. The pressure in the air was suffocating. The car door opened, and Gloria stepped out. She looked like a queen surveying a wasteland. She didn't look at the dirt, and she certainly didn't look at Sasha. She walked straight to Otis and placed a manicured hand on his arm. Otis, darling, what on earth are you doing standing in the sun with these people? The gala committee is waiting for you at the house. Otis didn't move. He held up the brass compass, his eyes cold. Mother, why does this child have my name? And why did Curtis say you paid him to bury a problem? Gloria didn't blink. She turned her gaze to Sasha, her eyes sharpening like glass. Sasha, I see you're still trying to use that poor child as a paycheck. Didn't the money I gave you last month buy your silence? The crowd gasped. Sasha's face turned from pale to a deep, burning red. She looked at the ground, her hands trembling so hard she had to grip Xavier's shoulders to stay upright. I never took your money, Gloria, Sasha whispered, but her voice was drowned out by the judgmental murmurs of the neighbors. Oh, please, Gloria sighed, pulling a stack of signed receipts from her designer handbag. She tossed them onto the orange crate for everyone to see. Your own cousin Curtis witnessed it all. He told me how you spent the last of the child's surgery fund on jewelry and expensive wine. Otis looked at the receipts, then at the jewelry Sasha wasn't wearing. He saw the way the townspeople shifted their gaze. They weren't looking at Gloria with suspicion, they were looking at Sasha with disgust. Curtis stepped forward, grinning as he pocketed a fresh bill Gloria handed him. It's true, Mr. Otis. She's a world-class actress. She kept the boy blind so she could keep the sympathy coming. Otis felt his stomach turn. The shame reflected in Sasha's eyes was devastating. But she didn't deny it. She just stood there, letting the insults rain down on her. But then, Xavier reached out. He didn't grab his mother. He grabbed Gloria's silk dress. "Grandma," he asked softly, "is that you?" The lady who came to the hospital and told the doctors I didn't need the light anymore. The crowd went silent. Gloria froze. Her hand flew to her throat, covering a small, golden locket Otis had never seen before. A locket that looked exactly like the one Xavier was wearing around his neck. Why did Gloria have the matching piece to a problem she claimed to hate? Gloria yanked her silk dress away from Xavier's touch as if he were made of poison. She laughed a sharp, cold sound that cut through the humid air. "Grandma, Otis, do you hear this? This is exactly what I warned you about. She's trained the boy to say anything for $1. Otis looked at the golden locket around his mother's neck. Then he looked at the identical one resting on Xavier's thin chest. His mind was a storm of confusion. He wanted to believe the boy, but then his eyes fell on the receipts scattered across the orange crate. They were clearly signed in Sasha's handwriting. The dates matched the weeks Xavier had lost his sight. "Is it true?" Sasha and Otis stepped closer, his voice low and heavy with resentment. "Did you take her money while I was working 18 hours a day to build a future for us? Did you let our son go blind because you were too busy signing these papers?" Sasha looked up. Her eyes weren't filled with the innocence he remembered. They were filled with a hollow, dead exhaustion. She didn't defend herself. She didn't point at the lockets. She just reached down and picked up a crushed orange from the dirt. "Believe what you want, Otis. You always did. You believed the letter your mother gave you 7 years ago without even calling me. Why would today be any different?" Otis felt a surge of bitter resentment. He saw the way Curtis was smirking, standing right behind Sasha like a guardian of her secrets. In Otis's mind, the picture was becoming clear, but it was the wrong picture. He felt a surge of bitter resentment. He saw a woman who had partnered with her greedy cousin to bleed his mother dry, using a disabled child as a shield. "I thought you were the one thing that was real in my life," Otis said, his voice cracking. He reached into his SUV and pulled out a heavy, black leather bag. He unzipped it, revealing stacks of cash meant for a business investment. He grabbed a handful and threw it at Sasha's feet. "If it's money you want, take it. Take it all. But stay away from my family." Sasha didn't flinch as the bills hit her shoes. She stood perfectly still. But Xavier began to cry a soft, high-pitched sound. He reached for the dirt, not for the money, but for the brass compass Otis had dropped. As the boy's fingers brushed the metal, he whispered something that made Gloria's face turn ghostly pale. "Mom, why is the man with the sandalwood smell giving us more paper? Can't he give us back the box? The box with the red cross?" Gloria stepped forward instantly, her heels digging into the red clay. "That's enough, Otis. Get in the car." Now she grabbed Otis's arm with a strength that was frantic. Why was she so desperate to stop a blind child from talking about a red cross? What was inside a box that was worth more than a bag full of cash? Otis allowed his mother to pull him toward the Mercedes, his heart turning to stone, leaving Sasha standing in a circle of money she refused to touch. Otis slammed the door of his SUV so hard the glass rattled. He ignored the small, sobbing boy reaching into the dirt for a broken compass. His mind was blinded by a toxic mix of betrayal and his mother's calculated whispers. He looked at Sasha one last time. She was standing amongst the scattered $100 bills, her face like stone. "You're just like the rest of them, Sasha," Otis spat, his voice trembling with a white-hot fury. "Using a child's disability to play on my guilt. You knew I was coming back, didn't you? You and Curtis staged this whole pathetic scene." Sasha didn't blink. She didn't reach for the money. She just looked at him with an expression of profound pity that made Otis's skin crawl. Gloria tugged at his arm, her eyes darting nervously toward the orange stand. "Come away, Otis. She's toxic. She'll drain you of everything just like she drained that surgery fund." Otis nodded, his jaw tight. He climbed into the driver's seat and gunned the engine. He didn't look back as the tires kicked up a cloud of red dust, burying the boy and the woman in a haze of grit. He drove like a madman toward his mother's estate, but the silence in the car was deafening. Gloria kept checking her reflection in the visor mirror, her fingers nervously twisting the golden locket. "You did the right thing, son," she murmured. "People like that, they don't have hearts. They only have appetites." Otis gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He wanted to believe her. He needed to believe her, but then his hand brushed against a small, sticky object on the center console. He looked down. It was a single, bruised orange. Xavier must have dropped it when he lunged for Otis earlier. Otis picked it up, intending to throw it out the window. But as he turned it over, he saw something tucked into a small slit in the orange's skin. It was a folded piece of yellowed paper. He pulled it out with trembling fingers. It wasn't a letter. It was a prescription for eye surgery, dated 5 years ago. Across the top, in bold red ink, was a stamp that stopped Otis's heart. DNID, INSURACE, canceled BY policyholder. The policyholder was Gloria's company. Otis looked at his mother, then back at the paper. But there was something else written on the back in a messy, hurried scrawl. It was a name and a phone number for a local warehouse. Otis felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. If Sasha was the one stealing money, why did she have a denied medical claim hidden in a piece of fruit? And why was Curtis's name listed as the emergency contact on a document that was supposed to save his son's sight? Otis slowed the car, his mind beginning to unravel a truth he wasn't prepared to face. Otis pulled the car over to the shoulder of the road. The engine hummed, but the air inside the cabin was freezing. He stared at the yellowed paper, his heart sinking into his stomach. "Mother," Otis whispered, his voice sounding like broken glass. "Why did our company cancel a surgery for a 6-month-old baby 5 years ago?" Gloria didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead, her jaw locked tight. "Otis, I handle thousands of claims. I don't remember every minor detail. Now drive. We're late." Otis looked at the orange in his hand. It was bruised and small, just like the life Sasha was living. He suddenly realized why the paper was hidden inside. It wasn't a message for him. It was a secret Sasha had been keeping to protect someone, but who? He looked at the warehouse address on the back. It was a place he knew. It was where Curtis worked as a night guard. "I'm going back," Otis said, shifting the car into reverse. "You will do no such thing," Gloria hissed, reaching for the steering wheel. Her eyes were wide with a sudden, desperate panic. "If you go back there, Otis, I will disown you. I will strip you of your position. You'll be just as poor as she is." Otis ignored her. He swung the SUV around, tires screaming against the asphalt. He raced back toward the orange stand, but as he rounded the final corner, his heart stopped. The rickety wooden stand was smashed to pieces. Crates of oranges were crushed into the mud, looking like pools of blood in the fading light. Sasha was gone. Xavier was gone. The only thing left was the black SUV Curtis drove, idling near the ditch. Curtis was standing by the wreckage, holding a familiar leather bag, the bag of cash Otis had thrown at Sasha's feet. Curtis wasn't looking for Sasha. He was counting the money with a cold, greedy smile. Otis jumped out of the car before it even fully stopped. "Where are they, Curtis? Where is Sasha?" Curtis looked up, his smile vanishing into a sneer. He spat on the ground and pointed toward the dark woods behind the highway. "She ran, Otis. She saw your mother's car coming back and she snapped. She took the boy and headed for the creek." Otis looked at the woods. The sun was dipping below the trees, casting long, jagged shadows. Then he saw it, a small, white shoe lying near the edge of the water. He ran toward it, his polished shoes sinking into the muck. He picked up the shoe. It was Xavier's. "Sasha!" Otis screamed, but the only answer was the rustle of leaves. He looked down at the muddy bank and saw a set of footprints leading not into the woods, but toward the highway, toward the very warehouse listed on the back of the prescription. Why would Sasha run toward the place where Curtis worked? And why was there a fresh, dark stain on the back of the white shoe Otis was holding? He realized with a jolt of horror that the footprints weren't Sasha's. They were much larger. Someone had taken his son, and Sasha wasn't the one running, she was the one being hunted. Otis gripped the stained white shoe, his knuckles white with fear. He didn't head for the creek. He ignored Curtis's lies and sprinted back to his SUV. He ignored Gloria's screams as he floored the accelerator toward the industrial warehouse. The tires shrieked as he pulled into the dark lot. The main gate was chained, but a side door was slightly ajar. Otis burst inside. The air smelled of damp concrete and old iron. He followed a flickering light to the back office. Through a cracked window, he saw Sasha. She wasn't running. She was tied to a wooden chair. Her face was bruised, but her eyes were fixed on a small, red cooler sitting on the desk. Sitting across from her was Curtis, tossing a heavy ring of keys. "I told you, Sasha," Curtis growled, leaning into the light. "You don't get the medicine until the billionaire's mother sends the final wire." Otis froze. Medicine. He pushed the door open, the hinges screaming. Curtis jumped up, but Otis was faster. He slammed the man against the wall, his eyes landing on the red cooler. He ripped it open. Inside were vials of specialized serum, each marked with a red cross. Sasha gasped, her voice a broken whisper. "Otis. The red cross. It's not jewelry. It's his eyes." The truth hit Otis like a physical blow. The money Gloria gave Sasha wasn't for silence. It was a ransom. 5 years ago, Gloria hadn't just canceled the insurance. She had bought the only available treatment and kept it under lock and key. She had paid Curtis to act as a guardian, forcing Sasha to sell oranges by the highway just to earn a single vial of the serum every month to keep Xavier's condition from becoming permanent. "She told me you signed the papers, Otis." Sasha cried, the tears finally falling. "She said you didn't want a broken son. She said you paid her to make us disappear." Otis looked at the vials, then at the bruised woman he had just insulted. He realized the signatures on the receipts weren't Sasha's. They were forgeries made by the person who shared his own last name. He turned to Curtis, his voice a low, lethal growl. "Where is Xavier?" Curtis sneered, even with Otis's hand at his throat. He pointed a shaking finger at a heavy steel locker in the corner. "He's in there. But you might want to check the lock, Otis. Your mother is the only one with the code. And the air is running out." Otis lunged for the locker, his heart stopping as he heard a faint, rhythmic tapping from inside. But as he reached for the keypad, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother appeared on the screen. "Walk away now, or nobody gets the key." Otis stared at the steel door anew, even darker realization taking hold. Gloria wasn't just hiding a grandson, she was using him as a final, desperate bargaining chip. Otis stared at the phone screen, the text from his mother glowing like a drop of poison. He looked at the heavy steel locker. The tapping from inside was getting weaker. Every thud against the metal felt like a hammer striking his own heart. He looked at Sasha, still tied to the chair, her eyes pleading through the bruises. He realized he had been the ultimate weapon in his mother's hands. He had used his wealth and his words to crush the very woman who had been fighting to save his son's sight for 5 long years. "I'm sorry," Otis whispered, his voice thick with a pain he couldn't hide. He didn't wait for her to answer. He didn't have time. He lunged at Curtis, grabbing the man by his collar and dragging him toward the keypad, the code Curtis. "Give it to me or you'll never walk again." Curtis laughed a wet, wheezing sound. "I told you, rich man. Only Gloria knows. She changes it every hour. Check your phone again." Otis looked. Another message popped up. It wasn't a code. It was a photo of a shredding machine at the family estate. with Sasha's original medical files hanging over the teeth. Choose your legacy, Otis. The caption read. Gloria was ready to destroy the only evidence that could restore Xavier's vision permanently just to keep her control. Otis didn't hesitate. He grabbed a heavy iron crowbar from a nearby workbench. He didn't look at the phone. He didn't think about the gala or his reputation. He slammed the bar against the locker's hinges. Sparks flew. His expensive suit jacket tore at the shoulder, but he didn't care. He swung again and again, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Otis, stop, Sasha cried out. The locker is alarmed. If you force it, the vents close completely. Otis froze, the crowbar inches from the steel. He saw a small red light blinking above the keypad. The air inside that box was already thin. He looked at his hands, the hands that had thrown money into the mud earlier that day. He felt a wave of crushing remorse. He had been so blind, even with perfect eyes. He dropped the bar and knelt by the locker door. He pressed his ear to the cold metal. Xavier, it's me, it's Daddy. The tapping stopped. A tiny, muffled voice came from inside. The sandalwood man. Are you here for the oranges? Otis closed his eyes, tears finally spilling over. No, son. I'm here to bring you home. But as he spoke, he heard the heavy sound of a lock turning, not on the locker, but on the main warehouse door. Someone had just locked them all inside, and the smell of gasoline began to drift through the vents. Otis looked at the keypad. It wasn't waiting for a code anymore. It was counting down. The red numbers on the keypad flickered, counting down from 60 seconds. The air grew thick with the sharp, biting scent of gasoline. Otis didn't look at the warehouse door. He lunged toward Sasha and ripped the ropes from her wrists. His fingers were raw, bleeding from the rough hemp, but he didn't feel the pain. Get to the side window, Otis barked, shoving the red cooler into her arms. Take the medicine and go, now. Sasha scrambled up, her legs weak, but she shook her head. Not without Xavier, Otis. The locker is airtight. Otis turned back to the steel box. He didn't use the crowbar this time. He took off his torn suit jacket and wrapped it around his fist. He began to punch the glass cover of the alarm system next to the locker. Shards of glass sliced his hand, but he didn't stop until the wires were exposed. He remembered the basic engineering he had studied before the money changed him. He pulled 2 wires and twisted them together. The blinking red light turned green. The hiss of the closing vents stopped. Xavier, kick the door. Kick it as hard as you can, Otis screamed. He threw his entire shoulder against the steel. The countdown hit 30. From the other side of the heavy warehouse doors, he heard the roar of an engine. It wasn't a car. It was a bulldozer, pushing massive shipping containers against the exits, sealing them in like a tomb. Gloria wasn't just hiding a secret anymore, she was burying the witnesses. Otis roared in frustration, his muscles bulging as he strained against the locker. With a sickening groan of metal, the latch snapped. The door swung open. Xavier tumbled out, his face pale and sweat-soaked. Otis caught him, pulling the small boy into his chest. I've got you, son. I've got you, Otis whispered, his voice trembling. But the victory was short-lived. A spark from the faulty keypad dropped into a puddle of gasoline near the locker. A wall of orange flame erupted instantly, cutting them off from the side window. Sasha was trapped on one side, Otis and Xavier on the other. Otis looked at the ceiling, high above. There was a single ventilation shaft. It was too small for him. It was only big enough for a child. Otis looked at his son, then at the roaring fire. He reached into his pocket and felt the brass compass. He pressed it into Xavier's hand. Xavier, listen to my voice. You have to climb, Otis said, lifting the boy toward the shaft. But Daddy, it's dark. I can't see, Xavier cried, clutching Otis's neck. The needle, Xavier. Remember the needle, Otis yelled over the roar of the fire. It only moves when the heart is close. My heart is right behind you. Just keep moving toward the air. As Xavier disappeared into the vent, the warehouse floor buckled. Otis fell to his knees as the smoke began to fill his lungs. He looked through the flames at Sasha, who was screaming his name, but then, a heavy thud echoed from the main entrance. The bulldozer hadn't finished its job. It was backing up to hit the walls. Otis realized his mother wasn't the only one out there. Curtis was gone, and the keys to the bulldozer were still in a hand that Otis had thought was on his side. He looked at a small, hidden camera in the corner of the ceiling. It was blinking. Gloria was watching, and she was smiling. The heat was an animal, clawing at Otis's lungs, but he didn't stop. He threw a heavy wooden crate through the fire, creating a path for Sasha. "Jump!" he roared. Sasha lunged through the smoke, her clothes singed, and Otis caught her. Together, they pressed against the back wall as the bulldozer struck again. The warehouse groaned. Dust rained from the rafters. Suddenly, a siren cut through the roar of the flames. It wasn't the police. It was a fleet of black sedans, Otis's own security team, led by his personal assistant, who had tracked his SUV's GPS. They didn't wait for orders. They smashed through the side of the building, the heavy metal walls buckling under the force. Otis and Sasha stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath as the warehouse behind them collapsed into a mountain of fire. Otis looked up. There, standing on the edge of the light, was Xavier. He was holding the brass compass tightly, guided out of the vent by the townspeople who had followed the smoke. Otis ran to him, falling to his knees and pulling both Sasha and Xavier into a desperate embrace. For the first time in 7 years, the sandalwood man was finally just a father. Gloria stood by her Mercedes, her face a mask of frozen horror. She watched as her son, the billionaire she had spent years molding, handed his gold watch and the keys to his empire to his lead security officer. "Give it all to the Foundation for Blind Children," Otis said, his voice quiet but unshakable. "I'm done with your legacy, mother." Justice came quickly. Curtis was found a mile away, the stolen cash still in his truck, but he was already singing to the police about Gloria's wire transfers. As the sun began to rise over the Georgia highway, Xavier reached up, his small fingers tracing the scars on Otis's face. "Daddy," he whispered. "The needle. It's not moving anymore. It's pointing right at you." Otis kissed his son's forehead, looking at Sasha with a silent promise of a lifetime of making amends. They were alive. They were together. But as Otis helped them into a car, he saw a familiar, battered envelope tucked into the red cooler Sasha was still holding. It was a second letter, one his mother hadn't shredded. He opened it, and his blood ran cold once more. It wasn't from Sasha. It was from his father, written 10 years ago, mentioning a brother Otis never knew he had. The truth had set them free, but it seemed the secrets of the estate were only just beginning to surface. If you believe that family is about more than just blood, please like this video and subscribe. We are so glad you stayed until the very end. What would you have done if you were in Otis's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We truly want to know.